that, guys and dolls, and thank you for continuing on this Harry Potter marathon with me. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as I have, and actually, I hope you've enjoyed it more than I have, because if you saw my last review, you will know this has been really difficult for me. But I feel like with each book, I have picked up steam because Rowling just gets better and there are more talking points. As for today, we are doing dun, 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 Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, book number 3. You will notice that I upgraded to a hard copy because apparently by this time I decided I'm not going to take any more notes. So I figured I'd pull out the big guns for you. I just want to impress you. And yes, I know I've got a little situation going on over here. Nothing to be worried about. I'm just aged. And all of my injuries are catching up to me. And so I'm trying out the KT tape. I'm not really impressed, but I figure I'll wear it and see what happens. But moving on. Harry. We start out with his favorite relative, Aunt Marge, coming to visit. He gets so angry with her that he inflates her. They say that he blows up his aunt, but really, he inflates her, alright? We have no damage done. And then he's like, alright, I'm out of here. I've had enough of you guys. He catches the night bus he catches the night bus to Diagon Alley where he meets the Minister of Magic, and he's super afraid he's gonna get kicked out of Hogwarts, but to the contrary, it seems that everybody has been worried about where he is. Who cares if you blow up your aunt, right? Like, she's been popped and now we're all good. Anyways, he goes off to Hogwarts, and what he learns is that the escaped convict Sirius Black is actually after him. And so there's this whole thing about let's make sure that Harry is safe, but Harry's like, I don't really want to be safe. It turns out that Sirius was never really after Harry. He was after Peter Pettigrew, who, I mean, guys, it's just something that makes me giggle every time. He was Ron's pet rat. So basically, Ron was sleeping with a man in the shape of a rat for who knows how long before he even got to Hogwarts. They used to be friends, Sirius and Peter Pettigrew, and then Peter made everybody think that Sirius was the one who got Harry's parents killed, when in fact he was the snitch, and then he staged his death. Sirius went to jail. So now here we are. Insert also Remus Lupin, who was another part of their friend group, who is a werewolf and is a current teacher at Hogwarts. He is the only decent defense against the dark arts teacher that these kids will ever have. It is discovered Peter Pettigrew, not dead, actually a rat. Everybody thinks they've got it under control, and then the full moon comes out, Lupin turns into a werewolf, and everything goes to pot. In the end, Harry ends up helping Sirius escape on a hippogriff called Buckbeak, and that's where we end, with the exception that Harry now has a convicted murderer for a godfather, because I forgot to tell you that Sirius is his godfather. Yeah, so now he has this convicted murderer as a godfather that he can use over the Dursleys' heads. So, there we go. Now, I'm just going to jump right into the biggest plot hole / confusing part of this book that anybody you ever meet will bring up, and that is, how did George and Fred Weasley not notice that there was a man in their brother's bed? Because they have the Marauders map. That is a key element that is introduced in this book, and what it is a map of the entire school. So it tells you who is where at any point in time. So if they are, 2 years older than Ron, that means that they've had this map for quite some time, because they're troublemakers, and I think they said it was their first year, maybe their second year. I'm sorry, I know I claim to be an expert, but there's a lot going on up here. And it's not always good. They've had this map for a while, and then they've had it for a while since Ron has been at school, so do they just not look at their brother's dormitory? Like, have they never said, we need to make sure our brother is where he's supposed to be so that we can do something else? And then not seen a rat? Or have they ever just maybe this school is so big, which I hope I remember to come back to this point. Maybe the school is so big that they would never be like, oh, Peter Pettigrew, who is that? Yes. So, biggest plot hole, I think, in the entire series is how do Fred and George not notice there is a man in their brother's bed? And now, before I forget, I want to talk about the size of Hogwarts. My impression was that there were 5 boys and 5 girls in every class. So, in every grade of Hogwarts, or every year, if you want to say. So there's 7 years, so that would mean that okay, let's start this over, all right? Because I'm not a math major. My thought is 5 girls, 5 guys. So that means that every class, since there's 4 houses, there would be 40. 40 times 7 is, let's see, 5 times 7 is 35. That's not making my math any easier. Give me a minute. Right, so thanks to my handy-dandy calculator, because girl was not a math major, that would mean that the school would have about 280 kids. But if you think about it, because this is something that occurred to me in this book, to say that every year has 5 girls and 5 boys in each house would mean that these kids would have to be pre-selected so that it would even out when the sorting hat chooses them. So can somebody out there tell me what they think the population of Hogwarts is? Were you under the impression that there were 5 girls and 5 boys in each class? Because it really wouldn't make sense for an inclusive school to only choose a set amount of students. Obviously, we know that Draco Malfoy could have gone to another school, so I'm sure there are plenty of other places that potential witches and wizards could go to. But does Hogwarts limit the number of students that they bring in? Maybe if J.K. Rowling could get back to me, we would have all of our answers. Because word on the street is that she knows everything about her world, which I'd hope she would. But apparently she knows the name of every student in Harry's class. So please, Rowling, tell me, how does this work? But let's talk a little bit more about the book, shall we? We've talked about the glaring problem with the Marauders map. Let's talk about Sirius for a minute, because I, for some reason, have this impression that, we all know that witches and wizards can do magic before they come to Hogwarts and get their wands. But my impression from there is that they cannot do magic without a wand. I think I'm actually mixing this up with some other book, but I can't for the life of me figure out what book that would be, or maybe it's a show. I don't know. But whatever's going on in my head is telling me they cannot do magic without a wand. So Sirius is in Azkaban, yet he can still turn into a dog. And then, when the terrific trio find him at the Shrieking Shack, he has his wand? Is this really his wand, or is this just a wand that he now claims as his own? Because, again, I'm under the assumption that his wand has been destroyed. Like with Hagrid, his wand was destroyed, which, that's another problem. So they're supposed to destroy the wands, and we know that when Ron's wand broke in half, he had a hard time using it. So if Hagrid's wand was destroyed, but is actually in his umbrella, how does it work so well? Because I think any problems are not because of the wand, but because Hagrid's not a good wizard. Which, actually, I would have loved to see what kind of wizard Hagrid could have been if given the chance. He just seems kind of inept, but I digress. My question is, Sirius's wand, where did it come from? How did he get a hold of it? If it's actually his wand, how did he find it? I think what really happened is that he just stumbled across a wand somewhere. Although, again, not like that's very easy. But there's so many things that if you're like me, you've read these books one too many times, and so now you're able to dissect are problems that shouldn't be problems, okay? My analytical mind says, Beth, where did he get a wand? And where did he get his wand? Where should we go next? talking about Hagrid. Cone of truth here. Every time I read this series, there is a character that annoys me more than anyone else. I've been annoyed by Harry. I've been annoyed by Ron. I've been annoyed by Hermione. I've been annoyed by Dumbledore. This time through, I'm annoyed by Hagrid. And again, it just comes with reading this series too many times and wishing it would go differently, which rationally I know will never happen. So the deal with Hagrid, I've touched on it before, the dude is too emotional. I get so emotional, baby, every time I think of you. And it gets really annoying after a time because I'm just so tired of him crying over everything, blaming himself over everything. In this book, the problem is he finally gets to be a teacher. And in theory, I love the idea. But in actuality, he is a horrible teacher. So he's the gamekeeper, which means he takes care of the grounds, the animals, all that kind of stuff. So obviously, he knows his stuff. He knows magical creatures, but I guess it is his giant side that skews his ability to discern safe from dangerous, or in a sense, right from wrong, interesting from scary or inappropriate. And so he's finally allowed to be a professor despite the fact that he never graduated from Hogwarts. And I'm like, this is great. Like, I love it. You know, I really want good things for Hagrid. But then, you know, there's an incident in his first class which leads to a drop in his confidence, and from there, he's just the most boring teacher ever. And then you get into the next book, and even the book after that, where he just doesn't really know how to teach. He doesn't know what's appropriate for his students, how to make a class interesting. I mean, I get it on the one hand. Things can't go right for everyone all the time. They cannot do everything correct. But Hagrid, I feel, never does anything right. Am I right? Like, if you think about the first movie where he's like, oh, shouldn't have said that. You know, like that kind of thing where all the time, shouldn't have said that. Shouldn't have done that. Oh, I screwed up. Oh, it's my fault. I'm gonna wang. And so in this book, it's not his fault that Draco Malfoy gets attacked by the Hippogriff. That was Draco being a jerk and not listening and then blaming it on Hagrid. But from there, sulk a little bit, sure, yes, but then come back stronger. Why does J.K. Rowling have to do this to us? I want to like Hagrid, but each book, he just gets a little bit more annoying. And he just has so much potential, and I think that's why I get bothered. Even in real life, I get bothered by people who have potential but fall short. And Hagrid, I just don't understand why she could not give him some redeeming qualities. Yes, he's a really nice guy. He's funny, he's loyal, but couldn't she have given him intelligence as well? Or an aptitude for teaching? Ugh, guys, like, this just does not bode well for the successive books, because I'm gonna have to continue enduring Hagrid as a terrible teacher, and then, you know, obviously in book 5, he comes under scrutiny by Umbridge, and dude cracks. You know, But we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on. Right now, my pro-con list is not really like good pro and bad con. It's more like, these are things I really enjoyed, and then these are questions I have. So Lupin is straddling that line for me. When I first started reading this series, you know, the first couple times, it never hit me what he represented, that he represents a faction, a community, like, because Rowling says this, like, he is representative of the AIDS community and of the way that people discriminate and shun people with AIDS. Obviously, since learning that, I see that more when I read these books. And so I really love what he represents. And so not only does he represent someone that we don't understand why people judge him for something he can't control, But he's a really great teacher. He is what I wish Hagrid could be. They have extenuating circumstances which could work against them, yet he doesn't let it. Unlike Hagrid, who we're still leaving that alone. But my question is, he's a werewolf, and then there's this potion that has the ability to make him harmless during his transition. But he has to drink it every day up to the full moon. And so then at the end of Prisoner of Azkaban, when the moon appears from behind the clouds and he turns into a werewolf and everything goes to pot, Snape had said, I'd come to give you your potion. So is everything he's done before that nullified because he didn't drink one? So 1 of 7 completely makes this potion useless? Yes, I get it. For the book's sake, we have to have a problem. We have to have a pinch point. On some level, it just doesn't make sense to me. I guess in my head, by drinking this potion, he doesn't even turn into a werewolf, which is completely wrong, because he still turns into a werewolf. He's just harmless. What is it about this potion that he can drink 95% of it and still be the most dangerous werewolf you've ever met? It's just one of those questions that I'm like, I think it's because I just don't want him to turn into a werewolf. I want all the problems to be solved right now. Because, yeah, if they'd been able to take Peter Pettigrew back to the castle, the story would have been over. Which reminds me, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here in 2 ways. One, maybe I'm a little behind myself and a little ahead of myself. I'm a Potter nerd, okay? And I've heard that Rowling had to completely rewrite the prologue to Sorcerer's Stone because she gave away too much. And then she had to completely rewrite Goblet of Fire because she had a character in there that gave far too much away. Can somebody please tell me what that was? Like, what that would have looked like? I really want to know how many people would have caught on. And here's a spoiler, guys. I mean, this is a major Deathly Hallows kind of spoiler, so yes, if you've never read the books, you've never seen the movies, pause, fast forward a couple of minutes, because this is a question, which I've now forgotten. Oh, I know what it was. Back before the 7th book came out and people were guessing about what the big reveal is, what the end or like why Snape hates Harry so much. Somebody guessed that he was in love with Harry's mother. Now, I can only imagine how that person felt to learn that they had guessed correctly. I wonder if Rowling even messaged them at some point and was like, you've earned a prize because you guessed it right. But it's just one of those things where I would love to see what her interpretation of giving away too much of the plot is. Going along with Azkaban, that by having Peter be turned in and Sirius acquitted, the story could have ended. You know, I just love to know what would have happened if she had released those first drafts or those initial storylines in which she thought she did something wrong. Anyways, on to more interesting and relevant topics concerning Prisoner of Azkaban. Alright. So, let's talk about Trelawney, because she's a character I love to hate, because the woman cannot teach. She is completely inept. I think if you put her and Hagrid in a race as to who is a worse teacher, it would be a dead draw. Maybe Hagrid would pull ahead a little bit because people might actually like him. I don't know. Apparently some students like Trelawney too. But Trelawney, I think she's hilarious. As much as she annoys me, I love her character because she's so bad. She's such a problem maker. And I love how the whole time, because Rowling, I cannot get enough of her crafting. And in this book, she's so good at diversion. And I feel like here she really steps it up a little bit. Because I know I'm a little off the topic, but I'm going to get there, I promise. So I've mentioned before how Voldemort, why does he always have to be the villain? In this book, he's not the villain. He is the villain, but he's not the villain. We still kind of circle back around to it, which I love because, consistency. But I love that he's not actually the villain. And Trelawney, she helps with the diversion because in the beginning, when Harry runs away from his aunt and uncle, he sees a big black dog. He goes to Diagon Alley and he sees a book about omens. One omen of death is this black dog. And then he gets to Trelawney's class and she's like, oh, I see the grim in your teacup. And Ron's like, oh, I thought that was a bowler hat. And so I love how she's perpetuating this assumption of what is in store for Harry, or what the end problem, the antagonist, the villain, like what Harry should be afraid of. Not necessarily Sirius Black, but death. Like death is coming for Harry. When in fact, the woman has no idea what she's talking about. She does have some seer blood, because if you have not read this book, Trelawney is the divination teacher, so she's supposed to see the future, which, can I please just go on a tangent and talk about the scene at Christmas in the dining hall, in the Great Hall, where she gets to the table and she's like, oh, where's Professor Lupin? And McGonagall's like, you didn't see that he wouldn't be here? And Trelawney's like, oh, well, I don't know what to say that because we all know I'm a fraud, but I can't admit it. But she's like, well, I don't like to basically toot my own horn, I mean, I just think she is so funny because the woman, while she does have seer blood in her and it only manifests rarely, she tries so hard to prove that she knows what she's doing. And that reminds me, so obviously this is not Hermione's kind of class. She eventually drops it, but Trelawney says to her, you just don't have the eye, you don't have what it takes to take this class, to be successful in this art of magic, or in this branch of magic. And that makes me think Harry and Ron hate this class. They hate Trelawney. So obviously, Hermione drops the class, which means Harry and Ron could drop the class too. And I know obviously they don't because of plot and all that, but why take a class you have no aptitude for? How can you teach somebody to see the future? How can you teach somebody to gaze into a crystal ball and see something? Like, in my opinion, these are skills you're born with. They're not skills you're taught. So how can students be offered a class that they show no aptitude for? I just feel like, one, it's in my over-analytical mind, but two, Rowling, who is so smart, so clever, I'm surprised that she didn't really consider this. Maybe it's just a non-issue. Maybe I am making it an issue, but I would think she would think, or maybe what I just need is a better explanation as to how does Trelawney teach them to gaze into a crystal ball? Crystal ball. I don't know. I guess that's just all has to do with chance and things like that. So maybe that's not necessarily something that you don't have to be born with a skill for. It's more of like you just have to have the knowledge of how to read what you see. I don't know. It was just a thought that occurred to me that this is a class, it's like an AP class where you should test into it. It's not a class that should be available to the wide world of Hogwarts. Maybe that's just me. What do you say? Would you take this class? I would not. And and that kind of reminds me, I wish I'd seen other classes. Rowling, she mentions other teachers, and to me, I'm like, why do they even matter? We're never going to meet them. So I actually would have preferred to see, I would have liked to see arithmancy. That sounds super interesting. I would fail tremendously because it sounds like a math type class. And that's another question. It's not necessarily a Harry Potter Azkaban related question, but do they just leave all of their muggle schooling behind? Do they not need to learn any more math, any more English, any more of those, or science, like any kind of those subjects? Gosh, if you're 11 or 12, there's still so much more to learn. So there are some aspects of Harry Potter that to me do not make sense. Will it stop me from reading again? No. What will stop me from reading this again is having to give another review because I'm having to analyze it more than I care for. Trelawney. What do you think of Trelawney? Do you like her? She's just a glittering, overgrown praying mantis to me, and I would want to punch her in the face. Truth. Very. Alright, so I have a couple more topics that I'm going to talk about. Whether they'll make it into this video, we shall see. But I giggled at the whole Trelawney Christmas time table discussion. One other aspect of this book that just makes me want to laugh is the seriousness with which Harry and his fellow Quidditch team members take the Quidditch Cup, okay? Part of this book, obviously, Harry is a seeker. He's a really good Quidditch player. And in the first book, when he joins the team, he is given a really good broom. In this book, his broom is destroyed, and then he's given an even better broom by an unknown entity who Hermione suspects being Sirius Black. Turns out it is Sirius Black. However, it was not with bad intentions. The broom is then taken from Harry, and it is analyzed for hexes and just anything that could hurt Harry. When he finally gets it back, and now they're making it to the finals, I just can't get this picture out of my head, where they are all so serious. Now, guys, if you want to meet an ultra-competitive person, you're looking at it. I think that's why this makes me laugh so much, because he's like 13, right? His teammates range from probably 14 to 17, and I'm just imagining them looking like they're going into battle, where they're all super serious and they're like marching down the halls, and then there's the broom to think about, this firebolt that Harry is constantly rushing back to his room to make sure it's still locked safely away in his trunk, which, can somebody please explain to me how a broom fits into Harry's trunk? I know steamer trunks can be pretty large, but is it as large or as long as a broom? Not normal brooms, but maybe a flying broom. In any case, the seriousness with which all of these people takes Quidditch cracks me up, because they are middle/high schoolers, okay? It is not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of life. Yet, to them, this is the biggest deal they will ever come in contact with. Until the next year, when it happens all again. Except it doesn't, because Goblet of Fire Quidditch is canceled for the year. But I just think it is so funny how this is a life or death situation. That's about it for now. I feel like I kind of trickled off there at the end. What do you think of this book? Is this your favorite? Is it your least favorite? Where does it fall? Did you guess any of the answers before you got the answers? I will see you next time for Goblet of Fire, and I can't wait. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, adieu to you, and you, and you, and you, and you. I know. Pretty awesome. Bye.